Now I know I'm super late with this video. I was focusing on movies and video games and I totally did not make a list about my favorite albums of 2021. But it's okay, let's just go back in time a little bit, like go back in time maybe 3 or 4 months, and let's just assume that we're in 2021 right now. And I want to talk about my 10 favorite albums from 2021. Let's start with number 10, Cavalcade by Black Midi. This is an album that is experimental, extremely technical, and it has so many cool stuff in it, like those sudden stops and start again that Black Midi likes to do. This is very much a Black Midi album though, so if you like what Black Midi does, you're gonna like this album. They make extremely technical math rock with a lot of very odd time signatures, a lot of weird tempo shifts. It's experimental in a very fun way. At number 9 is Hanky by Richard Dawson and the Circles. Henki is a psychedelic folk album by Richard Dawson, and I don't really know about anything about circles. The only thing I know about circles is that it's a shape. I don't know anything about circles being a band, but I know Richard Dawson and he's great, and he does his thing once again on this album, his psychedelic folk thing. So if you're a fan of psychedelic music or folk music or both of those genres, you're gonna like this album a lot. It has the kind of it has a rusty and very raw, natural feeling of folk music, but it also has those very hypnotic and very lengthy passages that you expect from psychedelic music. So it's like listening to folk music when you're on drugs, basically. And at number 8 is Drunk Tank Pink. There's a really good story behind this title, and I'm not going to tell you the story, you just have to look it up yourself. Drunk Tank Pink is the newest album by punk band Shame, and they represent some of the best of UK punk. I really like how they really go to different styles of punk music. I mean, genre boundaries isn't really that big of a thing nowadays. A lot of different artists try to transcend genre a lot. But with Drunk Tank Pink, I think it's really a trip down memory lane for me because it has so many different kinds of punk music. It's like a history lesson. And I'm sure that all punk lovers and all punk fans out there are going to hear a lot of their favorite bands inside of this band's music. And I just like how comprehensive of a punk album it is to all kinds of punk fans all over the world. You have like pop punk parts, you have some parts where it's like hardcore punk, and then you have some post-punk, just all kinds of punk all over the album. At number 7 is Things Take Time by Courtney Barnett. No, I did not make a mistake. That album actually has 2 take times. It's called Things Take Time, which is a very clever album title. I mean, if you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. But Courtney Barnett is just such a great songwriter. Her lyricism and her delivery on this album is amazing. Like, it's not traditional kind of singing. It's more like a talking way of singing. But it works in this album because the songwriting and her vocal delivery just comes hand in hand. And it's like talking to an old friend. And it's a very heartwarming and a very cozy experience to have. And it's also easily Courtney Barnett's most lovesick album yet. I mean, this album, it just sounds like first love all over. And number 6 is Cheater by Pom Poko. And I don't know, is that how you pronounce the name, Pom Poko? I mean, it's based on a Studio Ghibli film. And Pom Poko makes extremely playful, infectious, and just fun, joyful music. I mean, these are just music that are supposed to make you happy, and they don't really have that big of a message or an agenda. And really, I just like how happy this music is. There's no strings attached, there's no big meaning or overarching message. It's just fun, happy music with kind of a rock edge to it. And I really like Pom Poko for just doing that during a time when everything is so difficult and so tough. And Pom Poko just made an album that doesn't sound anything like the world that we're living in at that time. And at number 5 is Death of a Cheerleader by Pom Poko Squad. Pom Poko Squad is kind of bringing grunge back a little bit, but not going full grunge. It's like kind of a mesh between grunge and pop. But I can assure you, this is one of the more hard-hitting pop albums that you are gonna hear. And for rock fans out there, I think even though this is very much a pop album, but I think that there's still a lot of very good stuff here, very good rock elements here that rock fans can enjoy, like myself. And some of the grunge parts on this album are actually very grungy, and I like how just grimy and dirty they sound. And number 4 is Fortitude by metal band Gojira. And if you're a fan of Gojira's hardcore stuff, this is a very different kind of album. This is not Gojira at their most hardcore and enraged. This is Gojira at their more thoughtful. And this album has a lot of great concepts and great ideas. And it's not so much about the loud volume or the very fast tempo, it's more about the concepts and the ideas. And this album therefore has, I think, more detail than any other Gojira album, and it sounds a lot more layered, it sounds a lot more sophisticated, and I like this side of Gojira a lot, but I will understand why some of the fans would miss their earlier stuff. And number 3, we're in the top 3 now, and number 3 is Screen Violence by Churches. I think Churches is easily one of the best synth pop bands that are working right now, and I really like their style of synth pop. But this has to be their greatest album yet. When it comes to their greatest batch of songs, I think that still has to go to every open eye. But then, like as an album, as a concept, this album is easily their best. It has a very strong concept, a very strong aesthetic, and it sticks to that aesthetic throughout the whole album. The whole album sounds like a 1970s John Carpenter-esque horror movie. And John Carpenter himself even did a remix of one of the songs, so it's great. And then there's one of the songs where The Cure sings on it as a featured artist. Always nice to have The Cure when it comes to anything horror related. And a lot of really great stuff on this album. But mostly I appreciate it as an album, not just a collection of songs, but an album that tells a story with a very specific vision. And number 2 is Home Videos by Lucy Dacus. A lot of great folk albums this year, but Home Videos is definitely the best. Lucy Dacus has such great songwriting ability. All of these songs feel like their own mini stories. In a way, it feels like actually you're watching like a TV show, because every song here tells a different story. It also has a very strong, compelling narrative behind all of these songs here, and they all have very different narratives, so it's really fun going through all these songs, and a lot of them also are extremely personal and very intimate stories, and it's just nice listening to one story after another, and all of them being just as compelling as each other. I mean, when it comes to storytelling, this is easily the best album of 2021. And number 1, my favorite album of 2021. But before that, let's talk about some honorable mentions. Some honorable mentions goes to Blue Weekend by Wolf Alice, which is this depressing journey through the dark underbelly of Hollywood and California, and it has a very dark and gloomy sound to it, and I really like that. Crawler by Idols. This is one of the more experimental punk albums this year that still manages to stay within the boundaries of punk rock. I mean, it doesn't go so far that it reaches into another genre. It's still very much punk rock, but with an extra layer of experimentation. And then we have Life is Strange by Angus and Julia Stone. Just never thought they would make another album together, but they're back again. The siblings are back again. They reunited after after like 4 years of not making music together, and they still sound as great as ever. They still have the sibling chemistry, and their vocal harmonies still sound as good. And I dare say that this is one of their most nostalgic and most bittersweet albums yet. I mean, it gives off a very special emotional feeling when you listen to it. Maybe partly because they just haven't made music together for so long, and there's this very bittersweet feeling when they come back together again. But my favorite album of 2021 has to go to Daddy's Home by Saint Vincent. no competition, because Daddy's Home is kind of a throwback album. You could say that it's a throwback album to the 1970s and a lot of different genres in the 1970s. It's not like a specific genre, more like an entire decade of music. And there are so many different genres here that Saint Vincent just easily bridges through all of them. And she has such range and such versatility that she can go through different genres very easily. But beyond that, it isn't just a simple throwback album, because it doesn't sound 100% faithful to the 1970s sound. It sounds a little bit strange, a little bit weird, and a little bit off-putting. And I actually like that because it adds an extra flavor to it. It's not just a throwback album that is 100% faithful. It also has its own spin on the 1970s, the very uniquely Saint Vincent sound. And it's a very quirky and a very unique sound to it. It's kind of the 1970s, filtered through the mind of Saint Vincent. And for most throwback albums, really, the focus is mainly just, on the aesthetic. And there's nothing wrong with that, but this album is also very personal. It delves into a lot of very personal issues and a lot of self-doubts and a lot of anxiety. And I like how personal this album is, and how, be as a throwback album, it really ties the decade of 70s into a lot of Saint Vincent's own personal storytelling. I think it's very clever how it combines the aesthetics of the 1970s with a very personal kind of story. And that is my favorite album of 2021, and definitely check these albums out. I'm gonna leave in the description some of my favorite songs of this album, so you can check out the songs to see if they're your thing.